Evening, classmates. Week 2 discussion post forthcoming, so bear with me. Just going to see how this goes. This week we were supposed to talk about what our thoughts on the article, the video, and the 5 chapters from our textbook. Here I go. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about this week was the video, the YouTube video that we were tasked with watching. I actually really enjoyed watching the video. I thought it was very informative. So just kind of as we went through the video, I took notes on things that I found interesting, and that way I could circle back on them when it came time to do this video. So first things that he talked about is, I appreciated his bluntness when he said the act of writing is painful. Yes, I do agree with that statement, and I think that for me, the most painful part about it is ensuring that I keep my logic in a continuously flowing and interrelated pattern. I appreciated most of all, I think, from the video of his seminar, how he addressed that there are many types of logic, and when we are discussing the logic of reasoned writing, I don't think students who can't reason are ready for sheer creativity. He continues on shortly thereafter, saying something to the effect of, how can you think well if you don't understand logic of your own thinking? He answers his own question and says, you can't. This is why we need critical thinking to monitor and assess. Definitely, right? So the biggest thing that I found throughout this MLA program is, because I took a very wide range of courses, I've had to proactively shift the way that I think about things. For some of my history and philosophy courses, I had to focus on thinking about how things potentially were at the time, specifically the history of America 1945 to 1960. You know, there's a lot of things that you have to take in context with about what we were reading. But, you know, those kinds of things have to completely shift gears whenever you start talking about taking MBA or MBA style courses about management and leadership, human resources. You have to be very cognizant of, all right, using the logic reference, is this decision going to be something that benefits the company, is how you have to approach problems and hope to solve them that way. The second item that I did this week was the weekly reading, the quick little PDF file that we attached. So as I read, I thought maybe the best way to discuss it would just be to pull some of the quotes that I found most interesting and expand upon them a little bit. First one is from page 5. Purposeful thinking requires posing problems and reasoning through them. That quote stuck out to me in the reading because, truthfully, until you have something that stumps you or gives you some sort of problem that in your life that you can't just automatically bypass and get around, you're not likely to actually put a lot of effort into solving that thing. And so for me, using reason and logic to solve problems is something that really kind of becomes situational and is sometimes easier to avoid than to just stick a half-baked answer into it and move on, right? And the other quote that I have 4 that I took down, the other one that I'd want to talk about really quickly is, there is an intimate interrelation between the intellectual making of things and the ongoing critique of that thinking. It's kind of a heavy thought. I had to sit and digest that one for a while, but to me, the intellectual making of things and the ongoing critique of that thinking is really reminiscent of the triangle that was discussed in the first thing that I talked about, the YouTube video, where the logic of reasoning must conform to the logic of the content, and which in turn must relate to the logic of the student's thinking, but the logic of the student's thinking arrows back up to the beginning and must be beholden to the logic of reasoning. So using those cyclical type patterns, one, help thinkers think about different ways to get to final solutions, but also the constant critiquing does bring up more questions, or at least it can, I think. And that's kind of the point of thinking critically about something, is to run as many new questions and answers through this process until you can have no more questions, and then you get to your answer. And then the last thing was that I did for this week was the textbook, and I just went through and quickly summarized as best I could each of the chapters. Some of the key takeaways, I guess, that I found from the reading were from chapter 4, feelings and desires do not correct themselves automatically. They are corrected through thinking. That's page 59. Success or failure is determined fundamentally by how the situation is interpreted through the person's thinking. That one, I tied those two quotes together, talking about the second half of that quote is, two managers are presented with a task of doing something, and if one of them gets, angry that they're asked to do something so trivial, but then the other looks at that and say, hey, I'm going to do this task to the absolute best of my ability, then they're going to more than likely come up with two completely different end products. And in my experience, one is going to be vastly better than the other. One of the other key takeaways from the text that I found kind of related to the feelings and desires was a good way to find ways to change how you think or desire about things is to review the way that thinkers before you thought, because others must undergo their own evolution, their own development as critical thinkers. To me, that's right. That's getting after the point that the only person who can think the way that you think is you, and as a result, everybody else is always going to have a different idea. But that doesn't mean that you can't use other people's thoughts as stepping stones or mental models. Like, I'm a big fan of mental models, trying to just game things out in my brain, if I'm going to have a tough conversation with an employee or subordinate at work, I'm going to sit and think about it for a while and try to talk about in my brain, like, all right, of the things that I need to say, these are the XYZ potential ways that they could react, and so how am I going to react? How am I going to react if they react in the first way, in the second way, in the third way, and then play those things out a little bit in my brain, and then hopefully that way I'm not caught unawares when I actually have that conversation. I hope this has been somewhat insightful, and that as we go through this week, anybody that has any questions on what I've said, please feel free, comment, and I will do my best to, expand or go farther along in what I was thinking. So have a good one, and I look forward to seeing everybody else's posts for this week.